Francisco and Bay Area celebrate Black History. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. Also known as African American History Month, the event grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of noted historian Carter G. Woodson and other prominent African Americans since 1976. Since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world, including Canada and the United Kingdom, also devote a month to celebrating Black history. The Civil Rights Movement was an organized effort by Black Americans to end racial discrimination, we're still fighting, and gain equal rights under the law. It began in the late 1940s and ended in the 1960s. That's the Civil Rights Movement only. Discrimination still exists, sadly, today. Although tumultuous at times, the movement was mostly nonviolent and resulted in laws to protect every American's constitutional rights, regardless of color, race, sex, or national origin. The Greensboro Four. Have you heard of the Greensboro Four? On February 1st, 1960, 4 Black college freshmen, Joseph McNeil, Franklin McCain, Ezell Blair Jr., and David Richmond sat down at a whites-only Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and politely asked for service. The white waiter refused and suggested they order a takeout meal from the stand-up counter, but the students did not budge. The store manager then approached the men, asking them to leave, but they did not move. They also did not give up their seats when a police officer arrived and menacingly slapped his nightstick against his hand directly behind them. Moving right along, Matthew Henson was the first man to discover the North Pole. Contrary to his story, history revealed that Matthew Henson was the first man, and he was a Black man, to discover the North Pole. Based on observations and accounts of the Inuit, those are the Native American Indians in Alaska, and they are a group of culturally and historically similar indigenous people, traditionally inhabiting the Arctic and the subarctic regions of North America. So they saw for themselves that Matthew Henson, this Black man, discovered the North Pole. They witnessed, and they were witnesses, and the original photographic evidence suggests that in the 1909 expedition, Matthew Henson was the first to arrive at what they believed was the North Pole. The dispute over who arrived first would fracture Perry and Henson's bond. After an association together as explorers for more than 20 years, Henson and Perry became estranged, through the duty acknowledged the contributions of each member of the team, including the Inuit hunters. Perry claimed sole title as the man who discovered the North Pole. His assertions denied Henson credit as a full partner. Madam C.J. Walker. As the end of the Reconstruction ended, was ushered in a volatile period in which former Confederate states instituted laws that severely restricted the upward mobility of African Americans. Life for Black people largely remained just as harsh as it was during slavery. Black residents along the Mississippi River began to flee the South in the late 19th century, settling north for better opportunities. Among those making the journey was an entrepreneur who would become known as Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker not only worked her way to becoming a self-made millionaire, she also became a staunch advocate for Black women. When Black women unite, great things happen. The home security system, guess who it was invented by? Mary Van Britten Brown in 1966. Before security systems became a fixture in homes, an African-American nurse, Mary Van Britton Brown, devised an early security unit for her own home. She spent many nights at home alone in Queens, New York, while her husband was away, and felt unsafe with high rates of crime in her neighborhood. On top of that, the police were unreliable and unresponsive. So she created a device that would help her put her mind at ease. In 1966, Brown invented a system that used a camera that could slide into and look through 4 peepholes in her front door. The camera view would then appear on a monitor in her home so she could survey any potentially unwanted guests. Who invented the 3-light traffic signal? It was invented by Garrett Morgan in 1923. Arthur Compton, another brilliant scientist, he was the Manhattan Project director in Chicago and a Nobel Prize winner in physics, said the project was unique in bringing together colored and white, Christian and Jew, for a common cause. At least 12 Black chemists and physicists worked as primary researchers on the team that developed the technology behind the atom bomb. Not so sure that was covered in Oppenheimer, the movie. Yet, beyond Compton's lab and the Columbia University site, opportunities for Black scientists on the project were often limited by racism. Lewis Latimer. The light bulb itself was perfected by Thomas Edison, but the innovation used to create longer-lasting light bulbs with a carbon filament came from an African-American inventor named Lewis Latimer. Latimer, the son of formerly enslaved people, began work in a patent law firm after serving in the military for the Union during the Civil War. He was recognized for his talent in drafting patents and was promoted to head draftsman, where he co-invented and improved bathrooms for railroad trains. Mark Dean. Before flat screens and high-definition LCD monitors were the norm, PC displays were limited to screens with no color that was tethered to computers with limited processing power. That all changed thanks to Black inventor and engineer Mark Dean. Dean began working for IBM as a chief engineer in the early 1980s, making up a team of 12 people who would develop the first IBM PC. In addition to help create IBM's original machine in his early years with the company, he also worked to develop the color monitor and led the team that developed the first gigahertz processor. The massive chip built in 1999 would allow for higher processing rates at faster speeds within PCs. The Montgomery bus boycott accelerated the civil rights movement. For 382 days, we are not sharing Black history in a chronological order, but we're sharing it in terms of highlights and for historical purposes. And I hope that some of you are taking notes, particularly if you're not Black. This is our gift to you. This will help us all unify. And so many Blacks are not familiar with their own Black history, and this will help you to unify, because we all must come together. There's only one race. And moving right along, for 382 days, show you the power of organized demonstration. For 382 days, almost the entire African-American population of Montgomery, Alabama, including leaders Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, refused to ride on segregated buses. The power of money. Let your money speak. Do not spend money with people that do not represent or respect you. When segregationists bombed Martin Luther King Jr.'s house on January 30th, 1956, Martin Luther King Jr. house was bombed in retaliation for the success of the Montgomery bus boycott. Did you know that we had a Black Wall Street? The money would not leave the Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma until it had circulated in the community 19 times. That's the number of businesses that were self-sufficient. Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Greenwood Avenue in Tulsa was important because it ran north for over a mile from the Frisco Railroad yards, and it was one of the few streets that did not cross both Black and white neighborhoods. Greenwood was home to a thriving Black commercial district, whose many red brick buildings belonged to Black Americans and housed thriving businesses, including grocery stores, banks, libraries, and much more. One of the most affluent African American communities in the country, leading to the nickname Black Wall Street. The money would change hands 19 times, as I mentioned, before leaving the community. Unfortunately, the local whites felt threatened and burned Black Wall Street to the ground in the infamous and horrific Tulsa massacre. Black people built that. Iconic landmarks created and designed by African Americans. The White House, Harvard Law School, the U.S. Capitol building are just a few well-known buildings that we built. It's no secret that much of this country was built on the backs of African American slaves. Black people helped create schools, churches, and municipal buildings across the country. A Black man even helped design the blueprint for Washington, D.C. As we celebrate Black History Month, check out these iconic American buildings designed and built by Black people. And these are just a few. The White House. African American slaves were involved in every aspect of the construction of the White House, including clearing the land, transporting building materials, carpentry, and bricklaying. The National Archives has recorded over 120 names of people listed as Negro hired who worked with white laborers from the United States and Europe. But, as you probably could have guessed, the slave owners, rather than the slaves themselves, were paid for their work. Harvard University. A donation to Harvard University College from Isaac Royal Jr. in 1781 was used to establish Harvard Law School in 1817. The only problem is that Royal and his father owned nearly 65 slaves, more than any other slave owner in the state of Massachusetts. Harvard University recently released a detailed report on the school's ties to slavery, along with recommendations, including providing economic and educational support to the descendants of slaves for reparations. Now, this comes from Harvard Law School. They released a detailed report, including providing economic and educational support to the descendants of slaves for reparations. Let that sink in. Our contributions to America are too numerous to cover. The bottom line is America was built largely by slave labor, whose masters, owners were paid. As I mentioned, Harvard University even acknowledged that educational support for descendants of slaves, that they should receive reparations. So there is no argument about reparations. When you know history, then you will understand why there's a need for reparations, because Black people have been systemically or across the board kept poor. Why are most Black people poor? Why are we spending more money than anyone else and we have less money? We have a long way to go, but we have come a long way. And I want to thank all races because let me say this. We would not have the advantages that we have had it not been for good white folk, as we call them, or Caucasians, and we still have many. There were so many Caucasians and Jews and people, Latinos and Chinese that were all part of our struggle and are part of our struggle today. They walk with us. I invite you to continue to walk with us. I invite all of you to stop Violence, stop racial violence against Blacks, Chinese, and anyone else. It's particularly troubling during Black History Month that we're attacking Asians. It's a certain group of us haven't quite understood. I don't quite understand, but we can do better. And in celebrating Black history, understand that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Won't you be a giant? Won't you be an example? Live your dream. If Madam C.J. Walker can become a self-made millionaire, and her parents were slaves, you're in the land of the free, the home of the brave. Get some. Thank you for celebrating Black History Month. See you next time. Bay Area, San Francisco. Celebrate Black history. Always. Respect everyone. Always. I'm Diane. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.